All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the open source meeting for today, August the 8th. We do have, looks like some new faces around here and some older ones as well. The agenda is a little bit askew, not really. We went through it just yesterday, to be honest. Let me see if I can get it pulled up in a viewable format for y'all. But I'm actually going to start off with the developer advocates. I'm going to push any voting or nominations until a little bit later on in the call. So, okay, there we go. And I'll get my introduction in there in a minute. But again, if you are a sitting member on the committee, please don't make sure to share your affiliation just in the chat here. Okay. Nothing too crazy here. We've got some developer advocates, so we're going to allow them an opportunity to introduce themselves. I think we're still missing one or two that may have popped in while I didn't see it. We'll take a brief update from Nick on security working group items. We'll have a little bit of a bigger item to talk about in terms of developer experience, and then we'll put the rest of it there to the voting and the nominations there. Open forum we'll throw in if we have space. Like if we don't have Karen in the meeting yet, then we'll do some open forum until she gets here, and then we'll go on from there. But in terms of developer advocates, let me go ahead and stop sharing there. I can pull that back up at any time, or I'll drop the link for it as well. But Alex, I guess I'll pick on you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex or Alexei. I'm a developer advocate at Intersect. I've been in Cardano a couple of years, really involved with Gimbal apps and onboarding experience with developers in writing technical documentation. Again, for Gimbal apps and for other projects, supporting Helios, which is a project, which is, I think, a Catalyst project. And sharing the developer experience working group for the past year was a really awesome experience. So I picked first on a training, a Catalyst funded training by BlockSync, and then it got me very inspired and motivated to try it out, the new skills that I got in the training in a volunteering environment. So when somebody asked, like the chair at the time, Ben Hart from the MCC, asked at the time, who wants to chair the group? I said, yeah, I want to chair the group. And I chaired the group for the year. I learned a lot about the developer experience just in general, open source as a phenomenon and just a social thing, and how it relates to product and my previous experiences in, let's say, product development, and the just cultural aspects of open source. And yeah, it's very fascinating. I'm a certified alternative dispute resolution practitioner, which is a very fun thing, and I recommend highly to adopt this initiative in Cardano and continue trainings and continue certifying people in this sort of thing, because it's very helpful for the sort of things that we do here at Intersect with building communication, liaising, and building bridges between communities. Conflict is a outcome, but the skills there are about understanding stakeholder perspectives and being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks so much, Sigan.
So, hello everyone. I'm Suganya. Thank you for welcoming me to the team today. And I'm based out of Toronto. My passion for blockchain started 2 years ago, and I was particularly interested in Cardano because of its strong foundation, and in more particular, the choice of tech stack Cardano offers. Though it is a difficult path or a big learning curve, it still stands with the choice of tech stack which it offers, which makes it more secure and reliable. Uh, Transitioning both into Cardano and into the tech world after a career break of 4 years, close to 4 years, was quite challenging. And Emergo courses, which I have taken, helped me a lot. Right now, I'm working on my final project for my Cardano full stack course. Uh, in order to get an hands-on experience, I started looking for internships around Cardano, but I couldn't find many. But I luckily found internship for Haskell, and last year I participated in Summer of Haskell. I completed the project as well. I worked on their Cabal open source. I contribute to the Cabal open source, and currently I'm working as a soft smart contract developer intern at Anastasia Labs. Uh, yeah, so my initial experiences with Cardano development was really challenging. So, which sparked my passion to apply for this developer advocate position, where I could relate to at least a group of developers who are trying to build from scratch. uh, yeah, so I'm happy to be an advocate for Cardano, and I'm hoping to bridge the gap between its potential and the persistence that is required to become a Cardano developer. That's it about me. Glad to have know all of you.
Thank you. Give it just one moment here. Nick, I guess I'll give you the filler space here on anything you want to share with us for the security group.
Sure, happy to. So, I mean, it's going to be a very short update. So obviously we sort of drafted the original sort of security handling procedure. That's then gone, was approved by the board basically. It's been modified slightly, so there is a new security working group, which is no longer the security working group sort of answering to the OSC, but is now going to answer to the TSC, and that's the replacement for what was called in the original document the Security Council. But we've had a few meetings of like an interim formation of that group, and we're working on detailing the incident response procedure that should hopefully be coming live, and has also been updated with a few of the lessons learned from the DOS attack last month, and as well as drafting a SIP for the disaster recovery procedure that will be an updated version of the document that came out about 4 years ago that handled the disaster recovery procedure. And we're also just working on firming up what the requirements are to be in that working group. So none of these are done yet, but yes, the security stuff hasn't disappeared. It's still progressing, just under slightly different naming and branding. So I just thought it was worth giving an update. Okay, that's all.
Yep, and I'll get the charter updated for that here shortly. That's been my lagging point.
I'm going to try to share some of these in order here. We're going to move to developer experience. Yeah, okay, that's what I was looking for. So we just onboarded our developer advocates. You've met 2 of them. That's Alex and Suganya. There are 2 others. That's Bernard and Uday. If they can join us, we'll get an introduction from them. If not, we will try to get them in the next meeting at the very least. But these were attached to the meeting invites, if anyone has seen that. If not, they are in the ClickUp if you have access there. If you don't have access otherwise, I just say just take a look or try to ask some questions as you can. Let me see actually if it'll let me just share it that way. There's 3 documents all together. And with these are documents. I guess Alex, I'll let you jump in here because you had a big part in this.
Yeah, thanks. So around last August, when yeah, initially working group, we just didn't have any guidance on governance, and the experiment was rather random. So intuitively, we just went on with like, what we're gonna just do for the subject, and our intention was, yeah, let's try doing this, and then going through Catalyst. But this turned out to be not sustainable because it's like if you build a project and try to submit it in Catalyst, nobody gonna pay for it, and people just didn't want to participate in that from the beginning. I did it. I had fun because it was for me just the interest in just learning and building stuff. But it took us a couple of like 3 months of building some software and get nothing. And then the question was, I was like, how do we continue as a group? Because it was valuable and we all saw value of the group in Cardano, but it required quite a bit of like opportunity costs for the participants. And then our consensus got to that, like this group should make recommendations towards improving developer experience on Cardano, and that's already quite valuable for a volunteer effort. And how do we do that? We publicized this initially for a little bit, and we've had some people joining, and big thanks for Upkick for that, facilitating that. And yeah, so 2 of the documents so yeah, what we decided in the like, as you can see, there's like 3 documents, and each of the people have their own opinion on the subject. What, like in very short term, terms, what we came together that like developer experience is a sort of thing that always exists and always requires some sort of lookout, and so that ties nicely to committees. And what actually we should push for and as an initiative is for one of the committees to review this subject on a certain with a certain regularity, how often we want to do this. And so now this is the time. I initially thought be the best time to wait for the Cardano Foundation developer ecosystem survey, or maybe just is even better coordinate with them because they get a lot of responses there, and or the largest number of responses that I've seen, and they have comprehensive set of questions, and maybe we could facilitate improvement of the set, or like just perspective from Tors who leads on that effort. And that would be one of the big things that a committee at Intersect could do, an open source committee in particular, to do this regularly. And then if the consensus among the committee is like this area needs improvement, like within this quarter, for example, then we organize a working group which sorts this out. And but the way like we're discussing this now, it seems to be that at every this question arises at any discussion when people build context around the subject. Is like, is there a problem, and what should we do immediately? And then maybe it's not a good idea to have these meetings on a like with a big space between each other, because it requires people to rebuild the context that they have to have this discussion. And that's a question that we don't have an answer to. But yeah, I encourage anyone to read through the comments that made like in these documents. As a developer experience working group, yeah, we were discussing in the last, like, what are the projects that the group could complete. But this is highly dependent on who are participants in the group and what are the skill sets and what are the resources that they're bringing to the group. So, like, this is a sort of, chicken and egg question. Like, what can this group do? It's unclear until people are clear, and people are clear when we have initiatives that we could accomplish, and we could build initiatives that we could accomplish only knowing the people who will be building them. And so hopefully maybe solving this iteratively, we will get to some sort of resolution around the group, and more clear policy, more clear understanding of how to maintain this area of Cardano. And that's what should be the focus of the group in the near future.
So to kind of summarize what I'm looking for, what we are looking for right now, this will be aimed at Christian, Adam, Nick, and Ronald as our quorum, if you will. As a working group, do you want to maintain this and find community input for this via the OSC? Is there a certain level of participation that you think is appropriate from the developer advocates themselves? And if there's a mesh between those two, what do y'all think is appropriate? And if that's something that we discuss async over the next week or until we meet again, that's fine. But a general idea of what y'all want to do, let me know or let us know, please.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess we spoke about this a little bit yesterday. I think, I mean, for a start, I think like the topic of developer experience, you know, seems extremely important, and it's cool to see that you've been doing this stuff sort of in the background, and it seems like a natural home for it under the OSC. It feels also like the developer advocates would seem to fit very naturally into this working group. So I think we should have a way of like meshing the two together, you know, in particular. Well, actually looking at sort of the stuff Tech shared about developer advocates, you know, I think we had sort of two ideas of their role, one being actually, you know, advocating for developers to intersect more broadly in the things they need. And the other thing being, you know, helping basically with onboarding and the developer experience, which basically lines up exactly with what, you know, the DevX working group has got. I really liked I read through some of the documents that, you know, basically the principles and what they're doing, what the DevX group is doing seems good. So yeah, I would be interested in like trying to adopt this working group, get the advocates basically lined up with it, and working out, you know, what the short term goals are, you know, for that group.
Yeah. Which I did kick off another piece related to the contribution ladder, which I think kind of also feeds into this, which is trying to get a standard onboarder journey. Obviously, each project varies, but I'm dropping the deck to that if it actually went in the chat. There we go. That feeds into that. I'll do a whole walkthrough on this later, but it's presenting 4 roles. So you have a new contributor, then you go to a committer, then the standard industry term is trusted committer. We could get rid of the word trusted with a different thing, and then a core maintainer. But it comes with questions, i.e. it is merit. Usually merit dictates that, but how do you constitute merit? What does onboarding look like? What certifications are already in Cardano? What education should be available, required, and what's the transition criteria for each? And it's just to provide a standard guideline for anyone new as to what, if you want to be a maintainer on a project in the future, what's that standard thing that would ensure a higher success rate of merging into a role like that. But obviously you got to be involved in those projects. You can't just do something for Plutus and then expect to go to Node or something like that. So, but yeah. No, it's just there for congestion, but that's my initiative with the developer advocate program, and it kind of feeds into DevX as well, in my opinion.
I also think there's maybe something here which we talked about earlier, which we'd mentioned earlier, which was about there are some, you know, IOG projects which basically do fit on the DevX side. So a lot of the tooling, for example, starts to go towards DevX, and is a bit of a question area right now in terms of who supports that. So, you know, in a sense, if the DevX working group was also an advocate for acquiring funding for a lot of that tooling, that would be a very natural role for, you know, both the OSC and for that kind of working group to fill. If they're basically saying, yes, we need to get funding to make sure that things like, you know, Hydra are being maintained, because that's critical to the development of, you know, from a developer perspective, critical to the development of the node.
Yeah. Identifying those key dependencies everywhere as well.
I would object from point of view of some of the developer experience work group members. Yeah, so we didn't discuss really at the group the Nix, Haskell Nix side of things, because IAG seems to be maintaining that. And as a volunteer group, it didn't make sense. But now that you are saying this, like, it makes sense. This is a sort of lobby group for IUGX and Haskell.nix and all the things that support people who want to contribute to the core Cardano Haskell stuff. But then there are things that are not Haskell, and that's interesting. And then some of the people would say in the group that, but we really have to support with the developer, and the goal of the developer experience is a idea behind, like, thing that organizations have and communities have. Like, there's people who want to build startups, they don't care about the core software, and we should focus on that. And from that point of view, Helios made a lot of sense, and we lobbied for Helios in this group quite a bit. And I'm happy to see that, like, more adoption. For example, Wims is using Helios, one of the developer advocates in his community in South Africa. And myself, I use it for just communicating to startups. And if people ask me, yeah, let's build this on Cardano, how do we do this? Yeah, Helios is the best way, because like 30 seconds to run it instead of Bluetooth. Yeah, you don't have connection to the like a real chain, but it's a good enough model to just try out and figure out if you can make a Catalyst proposal with code.
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, that seems to be the same problem that we're marching ourselves right back down into, is not invented here syndrome and not my preferred language. Ergo, we need to go and expend resources making yet another new tool. So what about the guy that really likes COBOL or BASIC? Do we have to invest funding to build a library and writing Cardano smart contracts in COBOL because reasons? No, and IOG currently is, kind of benevolently, if you will, maintaining all the Haskell Nix stuff. That's going to end in the future. So we can't have a working group that is kind of blinded to that. And I do like Helios. I like Aiken. I've tried PluTS. They're all great libraries. I just don't know how they fit within the greater ecosystem. And if really at the end of the day, all we're talking about is packages that make it easier to write smart contracts, and we can have an unlimited number of wrapper libraries, and this is going to become unsustainable. But there are a lot of other pieces like database handlers and data access layers and other pieces that go into that developer experience work puzzle that need to be considered. So a lot of this documentation right now seems just kind of highly opinionated towards a small group of people's preferred tool set and not what is necessarily in the best interest of the larger, particularly external developer ecosystem.
Yeah, I can respond to that. So that, like, for the first just 1 hour ago, I was asking, like, developer advocates, let's then maybe have a sort of consensus towards how do we rank just general programming languages on their importance for Cardano. And this would give us some, at least, perspective and like into answering your question. But again, like, what you're saying is really, and I myself, in the first, thing that we supposedly be maintaining is, no matter what, developer experience ties to education and documentation. And then, like, there's a question in the developer advocate: should we support developer portal? Should we support Helios book? Should we support Lars Brunen's book on Plutus? Should we support Built on Cardano? Or Terence brought up some other tool, builder tools, Cardano builder tools. And what are, like, the actual even categories of projects that people are going to use, and how this ties to open source? Because to make this decision, I have to have, like, a sort of matrix, like, yeah, this project doesn't really fit the open source office or like open source committee, or it does it.
Yeah, and I guess that's my larger concern, is if it lives under specifically the open source committee, this feels like we're essentially incubating projects that will then eventually live under Intersect's open source policies, right? So do all of these incubated projects need to follow our policies and procedures that we're setting as part of this group? Like, what are the guardrails here so that this doesn't kind of get wildly outside of control. You know,
Yep.
like so.
Everything under Intersect, all those anything in our incubation has to follow the governance policy set. That's part of the acceptance criteria between transition, and that's why we need to make sure also the acceptance and transition criteria also accommodates these kind of concerns. Because it's also the investment factor and risk mitigation for Intersect, putting resources into the project's maturity. So I did, to your concerns too, Adam, I do want to be able to facilitate the conversation, but bring it to the forefront by being in Intersect, but obviously keeping those key concerns and make it straight and narrow and not every tangent under the sun.
So if I can get a final, just kind of, yay or nay on this, Ronald, Adam, Nick, Christian. My understanding is we want to chase both avenues of get the community involved, the community input, but also influx the developer advocates into the group and push this forward. All right, looks good then. I guess I will give this over to Christian and Karen, and we'll hit back up on voting before we discuss what we're looking at for nominations.
Yep. So a quick intro, and then I'll hand it off to you, Karen, as well, just to go over the process to make sure we're aligned. So everyone, we did walk through the voting policy last week and approve that, just so we can nominate our 4 seats. I don't know. I don't think we have official mechanisms until October to actually run through that. So it is subject to the committee, but that's why I brought in Karen to kind of facilitate what we can't do, and make sure we're aligned, because they also have comms going out next week, I think, about that as well. And I want to make sure we're not misconstrued in any way. So I'll hand it off to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I won't bring up my slide deck because it will all be shared in the next few weeks in some community engagements. But yeah, so in the process of September and October, we're going to be electing to the committees. So at the Intersect Executive Committee earlier this week, they agreed that that was going to be 50% of the seats of each committee is going to be up for election in October. And then the remaining 4 seats will be elected. The remaining 50% of seats will be elected in the following April. So I'm gonna be leading on a big communication engagement campaign throughout August, September, and October to ensure that the community at large feel quite comfortable with the approach we're taking. So following a large engagement campaign in August, the applications will be open for candidates to apply to any of our committees in September. So that's going to go live on the 1st of September, and it'll be for a period of 2 weeks. The key message here to anybody putting themselves forward is the level of membership that you must have to sit on a committee. So from October, and as part of this selection process, anybody sat on a committee will have to either hold individual membership, so paid their $10, part of the enterprise membership, which is currently being launched as we speak, or part of a seed founding organization. Anybody with associate level membership is not eligible as part of their benefits package to sit on a committee or indeed vote for committee members. So that's going to be one of the key messages that goes out to the community. So for that period in September, from the 1st to the 22nd, we'll hopefully be inundated with wonderful applications of individuals wanting to participate in committees. If you're already part of a committee, you can absolutely reapply for your seat, should you so wish. And we'd really encourage that, right? And there will be part of the application form that asks of what experience you currently have in both the committee you're applying for, Intersect or Cardano at large. So you'll be able to ensure that the community, when it comes to voting, know how you've already contributed, which again is quite important. As for voting, so again, it will be for individual, enterprise and seed founding organizations will only be eligible to vote. And they will open as part of the AMM process or events in October. So all the delegates will be formally announced in Japan at the event there on circa the 3rd of October. And then those elections and voting will be open until I think the 17th of October. And in that time, we would encourage all candidates to go out to the community and campaign themselves and sort of be loud and proud about why you should be elected. At the event, which we believe will be in Dubai on the 22nd of October, is then when we will announce who the committee members are going to be. And then we're asking the committees to come together, so those that have remaining seats and those newly elected, to decide who is going to be chair of that committee. Again, it can be the current seated chair, or it can be somebody new. And indeed, you can rotate that seat. We're not saying that it has to sit with that person long term. If you want to rotate the seat, then we're suggesting a minimum sort of period of 3 or 6 months to ensure that they've got time to get their feet under the table and take it forward. So, but there'll be lots more information on the knowledge base next week once we start the engagement campaigns, but happy to take any questions now that you may have.
Well, and do you help, or Adam, if you want to speak to it with our needs?
Yeah, well, the biggest primary concern is it feels like we've been pushing here and now we're just getting pushed back by entrenched bureaucracy. We're already half of our committee down right now as we speak. And the rest of us all basically signed up to serve through August, or I know at least probably Ronald at the very least, and Christian and Tex are staff members of Intersect. Like I think the three of us, Nicholas, Ronald, and myself, are the only community members on this body left. Like, what is our procedure if we're going to be mandated from Intersect and you guys aren't going to follow the recommendations that I've laid out? What do we do to fill in the gaps?
Well,
we need to vote before October. Like saying wait another 2 months before you get more membership to this committee is not a viable alternative.
And
like,
I thought
that just doesn't work.
I think we were okay to do that, right, Karen? To do the interim nominations to get that up and running. So I think there's no conflation there, Adam.
No, that's absolutely fine. You can follow that process that you've already put in place. As long as we're clear, as we're communicating with the community that that's the approach, that's not a problem at all. We definitely want open source to be up to full complement.
Yeah, I just need to, as we actually run forward with that campaign, that's why I brought Karen in to make sure that any implementation method we do doesn't interfere with their comms and we still get our body up. My initial piece was we need to do a 2-week nomination criteria. We can do a profile piece or something like that, and then do a Google survey to collect who wants to nominate themselves based on that candidate profile, and then some voting tool to bring consensus. But it needs to be the membership that votes on it. So I'm open to ideas on that.
Has anybody, I'm assuming somebody has started working on the tool that's going to be used come October, right?
Yeah, so Lorenzo and the team are currently working on the application form process and then the voting tool. So it's going to be the summon tool that we're using for voting.
Okay, great. And I'm very familiar with the summon guys. Like I say, we serve as the guinea pigs and, check out the first early preview introduction. I mean, this is the open source committee. There's not going to be a ton of contention. This is not going to be a highly contested ballot, in my opinion. And we can probably give them a good test of their tooling before whatever alpha stage it happens to be in, before we actually try to take it to the wider public membership in October.
So to my understanding, the tool's not yet ready for full testing, and I understood from Christian that you wanted to get your voting done in August rather than sort of September. So I think the dates won't quite align for you to use the tool as part of your sort of interim elections, but there will be testing on the tool, likely to be what's your favorite pizza topping. But if we can get the stars to align and we can use the tool for open source sort of interim elections, then absolutely we should, and we can.
Yeah, no, I'll kick the team in the backside through my own communication channels and see if we can. And worst case, yeah, we'll just do we might have to do a Google form like we had originally talked about, Christian, and then just compare people's emails to Intersect paid membership or whatever. It might be a slightly manual process if we need to confirm that only paid up members are voting, but I think we can get those comms out, and then yeah, we'll replicate the AMM and the biannual procedure as closely as we possibly can, so that way it's not a new and different experience come October for everybody, or September.
Okay. Well, and if we still want to do a 2-week thing, we probably need to kickstart on the 12th, the process. So we can do discovery today and tomorrow just to find out what the options are and then go manual, worst case.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Okay, cool.
I think the only other lingering kind of question that we had was like a minimum amount of experience necessary, or are we just okay with a potential candidate telling us what their experience is and leaving it up to the voters to decide whether or not that person has the kind of like open source experience to be qualified for this particular committee?
Like a review before the community review, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always the chicken and egg problem we get in blockchain, right? Like, who do you trust when you don't trust anybody? And so who is allowed or has the chops to review applicants to say whether or not they're qualified? So yeah, I think we probably have to just take people at their word and just ask them like, hey, what's your open source experience? So that way at least the voters have some sort of a criteria to judge people by, I guess. Go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
So as part of the wider election, each of the committees are being encouraged to go out and socialise, just like open source do really already. And all of the committees have sort of stipulated where there's criteria to be part of it. So for open source committee, the wonderful words we currently have for the criteria is: due to the work undertaken by the open source committee, each applicant will need to be able to prove quantitative, qualitative participation in building open source tools, projects, or organizations. General seats on the OSA may also be filled by senior maintainers or equivalent on a current Cardano project. So that's the current criteria. How we fully validate that, I think, is gonna be a thing that we have to sort of just suck it and see. But they will be asked to speak to how they meet that criteria in their application.
Also,
Yeah.
if we are able to collect their GitHub IDs, with Bitergia, we can see where contributions are made too. So that can serve as a experience search too.
I can absolutely add that to the form.
Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't want to get into a state of it's, a race to see who has the most commits or something, but, just so that you have actually participated materially and either open sourcing something yourself or as part of a collaborative open source project, had some experience. That would be my criteria for voting for somebody, was not that you have a blank GitHub history. That's not going to be a good look for anybody.
Yeah. Well, you can also pull if they've actually contributed to a PR and something versus just logging issues with everything. So
Right. Yeah, that'd be true too. Yeah. Have you actually contributed materially rather than issues logging or something?
So it's number of commits then.
No, I mean, like I do monolithic commits, so like my GitHub history looks horrible because I'll commit like once a week, like when I actually feel like the code's ready to go, but it's still like a lot of lines of code, So that's why I've always hated that number of commits as like a measure of activity, because I could do it after every save if I wanted to pump the numbers. That's an easily gameable metric. But yeah, it sounds like we're in alignment though. I think we're okay. And we leave it to the voters to decide ultimately at the end of the day. No stars or anything like that. Just a link to your GitHub, Christian, I think is a good call. And then we go from there.
yeah, that works. Okay. So I guess we can copy the criteria you have, Karen, if you don't mind sending that to me in a Slack or where it's found. And I'll copy that to make sure it's in Adam's policy. And then we'll build the candidate profile to collect that and then do a manual process if the tool isn't available. Just let me know, Adam, on your discovery for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll ask Adam Rush today and find out if he thinks that they can be ready in 2 weeks to at least give it a rough test, and we'll find out from there.
Cool. Okay. And then we'll run our comms by you, Karen, just to make sure the message is the same.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions related to that? All in favor to kick Nick out? Only he wants to
If you
resign.
do have any other questions that come up, please just feel free to drop me a message on Slack or Discord, and I'll come back to you. And any feedback on the process once it gets socialized with the community, I'd really like to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely.
I'll drop out now then, if that's okay.
Yep. Thank you a lot, Karen. Appreciate
Have
it.
a great day, all.
Okay. Also, we are starting the campaign. Side update from OSO. We're doing the campaign to make sure the governance policy gets in its full application now. Most of the hard fork requirements are done. It's just people updating to the newest node version. So we're pushing that forward. And then I'm trying to get the maintainer retainer program defined per our strategy for the diversification on core. I collected some repositories for the rest of the wallet address your repos and then the 2 Annotatus and Node Emulator, and pushing those forward with the development teams to get that put together. So I'll do you have your audit doc text to walk through by chance? Yeah, if you can pull it up, just go over governance at a high level. Sorry, Tex is with me in the same room right now this week. So
All right. So I'm going to assume y'all haven't seen this before because I don't think I showed you. But this is basically my audit process for right now. As this moves forward, I will go back through and make sure I have a proper list of all of these repos. I want to say this is pretty coherent because I do have 50 plus. But a majority, or the reason why I haven't been, let's say, being vigilant on adding additional repos is because mainly I've been the one creating them. And we have a template for repos that are created from Intersect that already matches these requirements. So that's the basics of where we sit. But if you see here, basically it's just a little 1-0 format that says, do you have this or do you not? And if you see over here, you can see where I've submitted a ticket or where it's an active ticket. And I actually went through I should share the other one, but I went through, I have another version of this document that was shared with our tech ops team to push the project team, the technical working groups, product working groups, if you will, to ensure that they respond to these issues. Because the TSC is not fully up quite yet, I don't have a full recoil on that, but it's something that I will be keeping tabs on. I don't imagine it's going to go beyond October without this being remedied and this looking quite a bit better. Basically, if we're going to be offering project support, we're going to be suggesting that this or something similar or a majority of this be a format that they use for repos under their projects. So obviously, we have to be a little bit more bulletproof in that regard. But yeah, I'm willing to answer any questions y'all have or anything else of that nature. Alex?
Yeah, just working on Bluetooth in the last couple of weeks. It's interesting. Like you have the changelog is 0 in the root repository, but if you look at the repository for Bluetooth itself, it's made up of several, sub-modules, each of which have a changelog. And I think maybe can they have a global changelog out of the in this type of repository, and what are other projects which have the same issues, like having changelog and not having it at the same time?
So I'm really glad that you brought that up because that gives me an opportunity to highlight my format here. So following required docs are missing and should show on the main page of code. So that being the code owners and the changelog. If there are changelogs, please create a top-level file and link accordingly. I did not have any issues in any, or I shouldn't say in any. I didn't have issues in other projects getting this done. So it's just as simple as putting a changelog on the main page, and then you can link to each additional changelog in the lower files.
All right.
The idea is that when somebody comes to code, is that everything that we say is the gold standard. They should be able to come and see it right here, like the rest of this.
Yeah, I don't see any objections from the maintainers, and that was my only concern.
Yep. Any other questions? We are open forum now, so if anybody has anything to bring up, or Ronald, you've been kind of quiet. I don't know if you have any ideas today. You don't have to speak. I'm just asking.
I don't have comments on this.
All right. Well, if nothing else, reach out to us here. We are pretty much always available async, and we will. I guess we'll have a nomination period opening on Monday. And are we going to have the newly elected by the 5th, or is that going to be a later date? It doesn't work out with your 2-week period, but well, okay. Well, I guess we'll circle back on that. But Adam,
Yeah, you guys aren't supposed to be having a back channel communications over there. So we'll need to have Christian mic up next time.
oh, sorry.
Oh, whoops, my bad.
But yeah, I just wanted to put it on the recording here that Summon did confirm that they will probably be ready to go. They have the tooling that we're currently using for the governance workshops for selecting the constitutional delegates. That should be ready to go. We can use that as a worst case fallback within 2 weeks. So yeah, like if we start open the nomination period on Monday, I think that's a good cadence. Give it 2 weeks and then at least get some of these spots filled up so that we can start having greater participation, more people to help out with some of these working groups that we keep inheriting, and just all around make the committee a little bit more functional. So. But yeah, just wanted to put that on the formal record rather than just a message in the chat. So we should be good, and I think we can go ahead and steamroll ahead.
Ronald, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question related to what Karen presented before. There's you need to be having a certain membership, but under the enterprise membership, you can collect several people. So does that mean basically if one of the organization is, let's say, an OSC member, that it can be replaced or swapped out when that person is not available?
So if you wanted to have somebody attend the meeting in your place and carry your vote, as long as they have the wherewithal, I think that would be more of a decision that left up to OSC, because I don't see any issues with that from the membership perspective. I think that answers the question. Oh, these guys, go ahead.
If you don't mind if I jump in real fast, Adam. So when we were writing the committees and stuff early on, we accommodated for the serving of delegates for companies. So you should be able to represent somebody as long as that membership's enterprise and not individual. Then you're fine to swap out your representation, because it's more of the company is voted in versus a specific seat, I would say.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. I guess it depends on who is actually standing for election. Like, is it IOG standing for election, or Ronald, or D Quadrant, or whichever other company you might represent? Because it's very similar to what we had discussed previously in my mind, which is maintainership. Now, in a lot of cases, IOG or D Quadrant or Well Typed or any of these companies would normally say, hey, Bob, you just got hired in, and part of your job duties is being the maintainer on this repository. So good luck, but within the scope of Intersect, that doesn't necessarily work anymore. And everybody individually would probably need to kind of chop their way up the ladder, barring some exceptional circumstances. So I think if we want a company to be on the OSC, the company should be the one campaigning in that case. I wouldn't be comfortable with Adam standing for election and then being like, surprise, it's actually going to be this other guy that actually attends all the meetings and does all the work, and they just use my public face. But if it is a company that's standing for the election, then I think it's okay to swap out the representative.
Okay, or the company can promote one person and declare who the delegate is as well to serve in their backup. Because like the IOG case, we've had 2 reps from them. Most of them have had to step down, but they just swap out the maintainers to still represent their interests. Because I think Sam Leathers was interested in running to replace Marchin or Moritz from CLI, something like that. But I'm gonna wait. I'm making them go through the nomination process we declare.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, like, I would be okay with like IOG, D Quadrant, Well Typed, even like maybe somebody like M Labs or whatever running as a entity that just has a seat on the OSC, that they can hot swap, and then individuals from those companies still being welcome to run independently, but just serving as like their individual selves, So go ahead, Tex.
Is it out of scope for us to extend an invitation to at least? I know we've been trying to move beyond the core 4 into the community, but as an aside, assuming that we can roll with a 6-month period if we need to for somebody, typically it would be a year, but we can roll with 6 months. Do we extend an invitation specifically to Twig, Well Typed, Cubic, IO? Do we allow IO to have more than 1 seat? Things like that.
I mean,
is that committee
is an
decision?
invitation needed, or is this just a thing of saying we allow, we allow other than individual entities to run, but they should be judged in the same way as anyone else. So it's not, theory, anyone could probably put forward hey, we are a decentralized autonomous collective that wants to run for a board seat. Then you have to provide evidence that, well, why should that decentralized autonomous collective be eligible for a board seat? I think just the general thing of, okay, saying maybe you can run not as an individual, but you should still be judged by all of the same standards. So if if Tweak wants to say, hey, we want a board seat, we should have to justify, well, is it going to be filled by someone who actually has the relevant knowledge? So not explicit differences for other places, just saying, probably the border should be harder for people. If IOG says we want 5 board seats, they have to win 5 board seats from there.
No, that's fair. And I guess what I'll say to cap that off is that I will revisit this with a separate meeting if there's, let's say, low participation in the nominations by the end of next week. We'll just kind of sync back up and figure out if we need to have a different strategy so that we have at least a voting base from.
Yeah,
people
more I would say, yeah, if we don't get a lot of good nominations like after the first week and it looks like we will still be short, then we could reach out to some of our core maintainers that have historically been part of this open source ecosystem and be like, hey, give us somebody, right? Not the janitor, but somebody that like is within scope and knows what they're doing. But yeah, I agree with what Nicholas was saying. Like if Sam wants to run a SAM, he can. If IOG wants to run and promote SAM, there's 2 different ways to go, but both are valid and showing history of open source contribution and qualification for the role. And then that would allow Sam to step up or step down as necessary, while hot swapping that seat if he was representing IOG rather than representing himself. So I think that's good.
Got it. Any final qualms since we are just over here? Okay, well, we'll get the comms out and see y'all in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.